Hello, my YouTube family and my night owls, welcome back to the Crime Whisperer. No, many of you drift off to sleep with these stories. So before we begin, I'd love it if you drop a comment telling me where in the world you're listening from. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy these cases. Now, let's get comfortable, relax, and dive in December 2023. Nashville Metro Police arrested a man named Bryson Rivers on charges of aggravated kidnapping and assault against his girlfriend, Lauren Johansson. The case came to light after Lauren's father, Lance Johansson, reported to police that Rivers had held his daughter hostage and brutally beaten her while on vacation in Tennessee during the trial. Lance warned the court, "If the accused is ever released, he'll kill my daughter," and, tragically, after serving just 7 months, that is exactly what happened. So, how was Rivers, an accused abuser, granted bond? Why wasn't he monitored after release? And how did he manage to get so close to Lauren again? Stay with me until the end of this video, because the answers will shock you. Who was Lauren? Lauren Johansson was born October 30th, 2001, in Ocean Springs, Mississippi. She was the eldest of 4 children to Lance and Tamila Johansson. Both medical professionals, inspired by her parents, Lauren pursued a career in nursing after high school. She wasn't just academically gifted. Lauren also volunteered at animal shelters and actively took part in community work, but her personal life was far from perfect. The relationship. In high school, Lauren began dating star football player Bryson Rivers. Their relationship lasted nearly 5 years, but was plagued with toxicity from the beginning. Friends and family noticed Bryson's emotional instability, violent outbursts, and obsessive need for control. He demanded that Lauren cut ties with her loved ones, gradually manipulating her into believing she was responsible for his moods. Despite the abuse, Lauren repeatedly returned to him, trapped in a dangerous cycle of control and reconciliation. New beginning. In 2023, while studying nursing in Hattiesburg, Lauren met Nick Bell, a 24-year-old Army aviation veteran and fellow nursing student. Unlike Bryson, Nick offered stability, kindness, and safety. Lauren confided in Nick about Bryson's violent tendencies. Nick later recalled a chilling incident. He once found Bryson hiding under Lauren's bed after nailing shut the doors to prevent her from escaping. Despite the terror, Lauren's relationship with Nick blossomed in August 2023 during a trip to Miami. Nick proposed and, Lauren said, yes, it seemed like she had finally escaped Bryson's grip, but she hadn't. Back with Bryson somehow. Bryson forced his way back into Lauren's life in December 2023. The couple traveled to Tennessee one night at a local bar. Bryson accused Lauren of cheating with a bartender in a fit of rage. He dragged her into a car, drove to an isolated parking lot, and savagely beat her. He choked her until she nearly lost consciousness and threatened her life if she called for help. He told her he had scheduled marriage counseling, furiously insisting she had betrayed him. Then he declared he would kill himself once he was done with her. When police finally arrived, they found Lauren pounding on the passenger window for help. Drenched in blood, her injuries were so severe that she required 2 days of hospitalization. Meanwhile, acted as if nothing had happened. When arrested, he calmly asked officers, "Why am I being arrested?" Despite the fact he had just assaulted her with rocks and a pistol. Lauren later gave a statement, revealing she had a firearm in her bag during the attack, but Bryson physically prevented her from reaching it. She also said the car had been parked for nearly an hour before police intervened. The tragic case of Lauren Johansson, a system failure. Hello, my YouTube family, and welcome back to the Crime Whisperer. I know so many of you listen to these cases as you drift off to sleep, so let's do something fun. Leave a comment and tell me where in the world you're listening from tonight. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy these true crime deep dives. Now, let's dim the lights, get comfortable, and begin part 1. The warning nobody listened to. In December 2023, Nashville Metro Police arrested Bryson Rivers, a 24-year former high school football star, on charges of aggravated kidnapping, aggravated stalking, and assault. The victim was his longtime girlfriend, Lauren Johansson. The charges came after a terrifying night in Tennessee when Rivers allegedly beat and strangled Lauren inside a car, leaving her bloodied and gasping for help. Her father, Lance Johansson, immediately told the court, "If this man is ever released, he will kill my daughter." It was not a casual warning, it was a desperate plea from a father who had watched for years as his daughter was manipulated, controlled, and brutalized by the man she could never quite escape. And, tragically, his prediction came true. Part 2. A relationship marked by control. Lauren Johansson was born on October 30, 2001, in Ocean Springs, Mississippi. She was the oldest of 4 children, raised in a loving home by her parents, Lance and Tamila, both of whom worked in the medical field. Inspired by them, Lauren pursued nursing after high school. She wasn't just book smart, she had a gentle spirit. She volunteered at animal shelters, participated in community projects, and dreamed of a career helping others. But in high school, she began dating Bryson Rivers. At first, he was the charming football player every girl admired, but behind closed doors, their relationship quickly turned. Toxic friends noticed how Bryson's anger issues, jealousy, and need for control consumed the relationship. He would explode in rage, demand that Lauren cut ties with friends, and convince her that his emotions were her responsibility. Was classic coercive control, and it worked over and over again. Lauren forgave him over and over again. She went back. Part 3. A glimpse of hope. When Lauren enrolled in nursing school in Hattiesburg in 2023, she met Nick Bell, a 24-year-old Army aviation veteran who lived in the apartment next door. Nick offered something Lauren had never truly experienced with Bryson: safety. She confided in him about Bryson's stalking, his temper, and the nights she felt unsafe. Nick later recalled a bone-chilling incident. After Lauren returned from a trip, she asked him to check her apartment inside. Nick found Bryson hiding under her bed. He had even nailed the doors shut so she couldn't escape. Was the behavior of a man who wanted total domination. But with Nick, Lauren seemed to finally find freedom. Their bond grew stronger, and in August 2023, Nick proposed while they were on vacation in Miami. Lauren said yes. It looked like she had broken the cycle, but Bryson wasn't finished with her. Part 4. The Tennessee assault. In December 2023, Lauren found herself back in Bryson's company, whether through manipulation, guilt, or emotional coercion. He had once again pulled her into his orbit during a night out at a Tennessee bar. Bryson accused Lauren of sleeping with a bartender. Enraged, he forced her into his car, drove to a deserted parking lot, and unleashed a savage beating. Lauren later told authorities that Bryson choked her with his forearm until she nearly blacked out, threatened her life if she called for help, pinned her inside the car for almost an hour while she banged desperately on the window for help. She was covered in blood when police finally arrived, and yet when Bryson was arrested, he acted as if nothing had happened. Calmly, he asked officers, "Why am I being arrested?" Part 5. Psychological grip. For 2 days, Lauren recovered in the hospital, but even as her body healed, Bryson's psychological grip tightened. A few days after the assault, Lauren took a call from him. By the end of that conversation, she was wavering. She told police she didn't want to press charge. She claimed she had been drunk, hit her head on the car window, and caused her own injuries. She even insisted she had tried to hurt Bryson. It was the hallmark of a victim in the cycle of abuse, protecting her abuser, rewriting the truth, and hoping he might change. Bryson fed her lies about joining the military, about getting help, about building a future together. He knew exactly which strings to pull. But police had enough evidence: blood, witness testimony, recordings. They pressed forward with charges. Despite her reluctance, Bryson was charged with kidnapping, stalking, and witness coercion. Still, Lauren could not fully cut ties, and that decision would prove fatal. Part 6. The bond hearing. On December 18, 2023, a preliminary hearing was held. The judge set Bryson's bond at $251,000. Lauren's father, Lance, begged the court not to release him. He described how Bryson always found ways back into his daughter's life, how she had been manipulated for years, and how his abuse was escalating if this man is released. My daughter will die, but in March 2024, Bryson filed a motion requesting a bond reduction, despite strong opposition from the district attorney. Judge Cheryl Blackburn granted it on April 3, 2024. His bond was reduced to $150,000. This decision was baffling, because the judge had, in her possession, an 11-minute audio recording from the December assault. Police also testified that Lauren had changed her story after Bryson called her from jail. Clear evidence of witness tampering, yet the bond was lowered. Conditions were attached. Bryson could not leave Davidson County. He would be monitored with a GPS tracker, and he had to be released before 4 p.m. so he could report directly to the GPS company. But what followed was a cascade of bureaucratic failures. Part 7. System failures unraveled. The bond conditions placed on Bryson Rivers should have been airtight. He wasn't allowed to leave Davidson County, and he was required to wear a GPS monitor at all times, but within days, those safeguards collapsed. The GPS company Freedom Monitoring Services was brand new, barely a week old when Bryson was released. They weren't fully briefed on his conditions, and so they never realized the address Bryson gave them in Mississippi was actually Lauren Johansson's residence. That meant Bryson wasn't just breaking bond by leaving Tennessee. He was already circling back to his victim on June 29, 2024. Bryson briefly returned to Nashville because his GPS monitor malfunctioned. He was told to report to the monitoring office, but almost as quickly as he arrived, he vanished again. He had a court hearing scheduled for July 2, 2024. He never showed. His GPS tracker battery was dying, and the last known signal placed him in Bowie, Mississippi when Freedom Monitoring contacted Bryson's mother. She told them she hadn't seen her son and had no idea where he was. The court, realizing he had fled the county, issued a warrant for his arrest, but by then, it was already too late. Part 8. A father's worst fears. On June 28, 2024, before the warrant was even signed, Lance Johansson received a chilling voicemail from the Nashville District Attorney's Office. This is Bailey from the DA's office. Bryson Rivers has been released. He was supposed to report to GPS monitoring but never did, and he has not been heard from. We want to make sure Lauren is safe. But Lance didn't hear that voicemail until July 1st, 3 days later. By then, Bryson had been free and unmonitored. For nearly a week, Lance immediately texted his daughter to check on her. She responded, but something about the tone of the message felt off, like the words weren't truly hers. Lance later said he believed Bryson may have been the one replying for Lance. The shock cut deep. He had been assured by both prosecutors and the court that Bryson would not be released and that Lauren was safe. Instead, his daughter was now exposed, and he hadn't even been notified until days later. Part 9. Disappearance. On July 2, 2024. At 4 a.m., Lance received a disturbing notification through the family's Life 360 app, a tracking tool they had all installed to keep tabs on each other's safety. The alert read, "Lauren's location services have been turned off." She had been staying with her sister in Hattiesburg, Mississippi that morning. Her sister woke up to find Lauren gone. The front door stood open, and the home's security camera had been ripped from the wall. It was clear someone had taken her. Lance raced to police in Hattiesburg to report her missing. To his horror, officers seemed lethargic, uninterested. They delayed, stalled, and failed to take immediate action. It wasn't until 3 p.m. the following day, July 3rd, that Lance finally convinced them to act. Police used OnStar, the car tracking system, to locate Lauren's vehicle. The car pinged in Gulfport, Mississippi, more than 90 minutes away. Part 10. The discovery. When officers arrived at Wolf River Cemetery in Harrison County, they found Lauren's car. Inside, on the back seat, was her body. She was wrapped in sheets and trash bags, brutally beaten. Her eyes were swollen shut. Her skull had been fractured. Her entire face was mutilated beyond recognition. The injuries were so savage that investigators later said her head had multiple holes smashed into it. She had been bludgeoned to death. For Lance, who rushed to the scene after hearing the car's location, the sight was indescribable. His daughter, who had survived years of manipulation and abuse, had finally been murdered by the man he had begged the court to keep behind bars. And Bryson, he wasn't finished yet. Part 11. The manhunt. As officers examined the car, a man suddenly bolted from the woods nearby. It was Bryson Rivers. He ran deeper into the forest, sparking an intense manhunt. More than 50 officers, drones, dogs, and a helicopter scoured the woods for 6 hours. Bryson evaded capture. Finally, police devised a trap. They used text messages to convince him that a friend was on the way to pick him up and take him to safety. Bryson fell for it when he arrived at the meeting spot, expecting rescue. He was arrested. Part 12. Aftermath of failure. In the days that followed, investigators pieced together just how badly the system had failed. The bonding company never fully read the court order. The clerk's office failed to provide the complete bond conditions. The GPS monitoring company was new, inexperienced, and uninformed. Bryson was released after 4 p.m., missing the mandatory cutoff to ensure he was fitted with a tracker. Before leaving custody, and the DA's voicemail to Lauren's father wasn't received until it was already too late by the time anyone acted. Lauren was gone. Part 13. Court proceedings. After his capture, Bryson Rivers was transferred to Forest County, Mississippi, where prosecutors determined Lauren had actually been murdered before. Her body was transported across county lines on July 26, 2024. Bryson made his first appearance in court. Additional charges were filed: first-degree murder, tampering with evidence, grand larceny, and his bond was permanently denied. In August 23, 2024, he appeared again before Judge Gay Pokapayton. His attorneys requested bond. The judge denied it. Without hesitation, investigators laid out their case. Lauren had been killed near her residence in Forest County, then moved to Wolf River Cemetery in Harrison County in a calculated attempt to mislead authorities. Bryson Rivers now faces life in prison or worse. Part 14. A broken system. For Lance Johansson, none of it makes sense. His warnings were ignored, his daughter's statements were twisted, and the justice system allowed a violent abuser to walk free not once, but repeatedly. Every safeguard failed. The courts, the clerks, the bonding companies, the GPS monitoring, and even law enforcement response. When Lauren vanished, and the price was his daughter's life. Part 15. Final reflection. Lauren Johansson's story is not just a tale of intimate partner violence. It's a brutal reminder of how dangerous system failures can be. Every missed detail, every clerical error, every delayed response adds up, and when the victim is trapped in the cycle of abuse, those mistakes can mean death. Lauren's life was stolen by a man who should never have been free. Her father said it best months before her murder: "If this man is released, he will kill my daughter," and the system allowed him to do exactly that. Case 1. The disappearance of Lauren Johansson. According to investigator Benoit, newly recovered video footage revealed that shortly after his release on bond, Bryson Rivers voluntarily met with Lauren Johansson at a hotel phone. Records presented in court showed that on July 2nd, Bryson attempted to contact Lauren 126 times, constantly demanding to know her location. Despite his persistence, Lauren never answered his calls or messages. That same night, Bryson visited his mother's home in McHenry at 2:15 a.m. He texted a friend, asking for a ride to Hattiesburg. Security cameras in Lauren's neighborhood later captured Bryson arriving in the early hours of July due to rising fears. Lauren had installed 11 cameras around her home, yet when police searched the house after she went missing, they discovered that 5 cameras had been stolen at 3:58 a.m. Surveillance footage showed Bryson walking toward Lauren's residence. Inside were Lauren, her sister, and a friend, J.C. Wilson, according to Lauren's father. She had likely called J.C. for protection after learning that Bryson was out of jail's security. Footage later captured Bryson briefly leaving the house at 5:11 a.m., before rushing back inside. When he finally emerged again, he was shirtless minutes later. At 5:51 a.m., Lauren's car was seen leaving the residence. Investigators believe she was still alive at that moment, though Bryson was the only person visible behind the wheel in traffic and security camera footage. Instead of driving directly, Bryson wandered around Hattiesburg downtown, then to Chain Park, and finally to Petal River Park, where he stayed for 32 minutes. Months later, on October 9th, 2024, a 6-judge panel concluded that the bond companies responsible for Bryson's release had made serious errors, while their actions were not deemed illegal. The court ruled there was clear negligence across multiple parties' failures that ultimately contributed to the tragic death of Lauren Johansson. Today, Bryson Rivers remains in custody as a grand jury deliberates his fate case. 2. The disappearance of Melon Sodoimagine, the joy of a 13th birthday party, balloons, laughter, and the promise of the future for Melon Soto of Kissimmee, Florida. That joy turned to tragedy just one day after her birthday. The spirited young girl vanished without a trace in February 26, 2024. Her family's world collapsed. The last person to see her was her mother's boyfriend, Stephen Stearns, who claimed he dropped her at school, but investigators quickly discovered inconsistencies in his account, turning what began as a missing child case into something much darker. Melon lived with her mother, Jennifer Soto, in the Venetian Bay village. Complex, their relationship, though loving, was fraught with conflict. Jennifer struggled with mental health issues. Melene confided to friends that her mother was bipolar, and their frequent arguments left her feeling isolated. Diagnosed with ADHD, Melene often struggled in school. Teachers described her as sweet, but easily distracted in the months before her disappearance. However, friends noticed troubling changes. She seemed sad, tired, and often cried for no reason, complicating matters. With Stephen Stearns, though Melene affectionately called him her stepfather and often turned to him during arguments with her mother, his presence in the household raised concerns. In early 2024, Melene began expressing a strange desire to run away and build a house in the woods once she turned 13 at the time. Her friends thought it was just childish fantasy, but after her disappearance, those words took on a chilling new meaning. That fateful morning seemed ordinary, but beneath the surface lay tension and fear. As investigators retraced her final hours, they uncovered a disturbing reality: family dynamic filled with secrets, instability, and betrayal. What began as the search for a missing girl soon unraveled into a harrowing tale of deception and heartbreak. As investigators dug deeper into Melon's world, unsettling contradictions began to surface. On the morning of February 26th, Stephen Stearns insisted he had dropped her at school, yet no teachers recalled seeing her in class, and security footage offered no sign of her arrival. The timeline didn't add up. Detectives began scrutinizing Stephen's story. His behavior, at first cooperative, grew increasingly evasive as inconsistencies piled up. Why were his phone records showing detours that morning? Why did neighbors report unusual noises coming from the Soto residence the night before? Meanwhile, Jennifer, Melene's mother, was in anguish. She told police that Melene had been restless in recent weeks, daydreaming about escaping, even talking about building a cabin in the woods once she turned 13. What seemed like childish fantasy now weighed heavily as investigators considered whether the young girl had tried to run away, or if something far darker had occurred within her own home. The community held out hope, organizing vigils and search parties. Flyers with Melon's smiling face lined the streets of Kissimmee, Florida, but whispers spread quickly. Doubts about Stephen's story, questions about Jennifer's turbulent relationship with her daughter, and the haunting possibility that the threat to Melene had been inside her home all along. Police intensified their search, focusing on surveillance footage, phone data, and testimonies. With every detail uncovered, one chilling truth loomed large: disappearance was no accident. The investigation was no longer about finding a missing girl. It was about exposing the lies and betrayals that had hidden in plain sight. The tragic fate of Madeline Soto, February 26, 2024. Began like any ordinary day. Jennifer Soto woke to the faint sounds of her boyfriend, Stephen Stearns, taking their dog outside still half asleep. She rolled over in bed, unaware that her life and her daughter's was about to unravel in the most tragic way that morning. Stephen offered to drive Madeline, Jennifer's 13-year-old daughter, to school, but instead of dropping her at Hunters Creek Middle School, he made a troubling choice at about 8:30 a.m. Stephen let Madeline out at Peace United Methodist Church, a building just across the street from the surveillance. Cameras later revealed the last known moments of the young girl. She lingered in the church parking lot, sitting on the ground for a while, her small frame looking lost and contemplative. Eventually, she stood, walked toward the school, and then vanished. Madeline never arrived to class. No one knew it at the time, but those grainy security images captured the final moments she would ever be seen. As the day wore on, Stephen casually mentioned to Jennifer that he had performed a factory reset on his phone, claiming it was an attempt to update the device. The timing of this would later raise serious questions. By 4:30 p.m., Jennifer drove to the school to pick up her daughter. She scanned the students streaming out, searching eagerly for Madeline's face, but the crowd thinned, and dread began to creep in school. Staff then confirmed her worst fear. Madeline had never attended classes that day. Panic set in. Jennifer searched every familiar place, her mother's office, neighborhood streets, anywhere her daughter might have gone. She called out Madeline's name, but the silence grew heavier with every minute. Desperate, she turned to social media, pleading for help, posting Madeline's photo, and hoping someone had seen her. Evening. With no answers, and darkness settling in, Jennifer dialed 911 around 8 p.m. to report her daughter missing. Yet, shockingly, law enforcement response was slow. Deputies did not arrive until hours later, nearly 12 hours since Madeline was last seen. When officers finally spoke with Jennifer and Stephen, they began piecing together the timeline. It didn't take long for them to notice troubling inconsistencies, especially in Stephen's story. His calm, almost detached demeanor raised suspicions. The next day, February 27th, a massive search effort began. More than 100 personnel joined law enforcement, K-9 units, volunteers, even mounted patrols. Flyers with Madeline's face circulated everywhere. Teams scoured trails, wooded areas, and fields around the school. The community's hope was to bring her home safely. But, with each passing hour, dread deepened. Investigators soon discovered more alarming details. Madeline had left her phone at home that morning, something not unusual given her ADHD, but this time it felt ominous without it. She was completely untraceable. When police revisited Stephen's account, cracks began to show. He claimed he left Madeline at the church, but his phone reset on the very same day she vanished. Seemed far too convenient. Detectives noted his nervousness. Despite his attempt to remain calm, they also learned about troubling activity involving his vehicle license plate, which would later become a pivotal clue as the search widened and evidence mounted. The truth about what really happened to Madeline Soto began to emerge, a truth far darker than anyone could have imagined. Court records released on March 6 revealed a chilling truth. Stephen had allegedly been abusing Madeline for years, despite his attempts to wipe his phone clean. Investigators managed to recover fragments of deleted files. These remnants contained explicit content involving Madeline, some of it dating as far back as 2022. The material confirmed investigators' worst fears, that her suffering had been ongoing, not a sudden act of violence. Adding to the mounting evidence, police interviewed a former acquaintance of Stephen's. This individual painted a disturbing portrait of his behavior, describing him as controlling, manipulative, and secretive. The testimony aligned with the digital evidence recovered from his devices, reinforcing investigators' belief that Madeline's death was the tragic culmination of years of abuse and exploitation. Additionally, detectives interviewed a former acquaintance of Stephen, provided chilling details that further deepened suspicions. The acquaintance alleged that Stephen had displayed troubling behaviors in the past, often making inappropriate remarks about young girls and showing an unusual fixation on controlling those around him. These disturbing patterns, combined with the explicit digital evidence recovered, painted a grim portrait of his character. Investigators emphasized that while the physical evidence, such as the items discarded in the dumpster and the phone data, was damning, the testimonies from people who had known Stephen helped solidify a timeline of manipulation and abuse. Each revelation added another layer to the horrific reality that was unfolding by this stage. Authorities were convinced they were not simply dealing with a case of poor judgment or negligence. Instead, the evidence pointed toward years of predatory behavior, culminating in the unthinkable tragedy of Madeline's death. What had started as a desperate community search for a missing girl had evolved into an investigation that exposed the darkest truths hidden inside her own home. The courtroom battle ahead promised to be just as harrowing as the investigation, with prosecutors preparing to reveal every disturbing detail of Stephen's actions for the community. The hope was no longer for Madeline's safe return, but for justice to be delivered in her memory. Family, who provided chilling testimony. She recalled visiting the Stearns' apartment months earlier and noticing Malene seemed withdrawn, almost fearful. Whenever Stephen entered the room, this acquaintance described hearing strange noises from Malene's bedroom late at night, sounds that, at the time, she brushed off as family matters. In hindsight, she admitted those memories felt hauntingly sinister. Prosecutors began building their case around not just the physical evidence, Malene's belongings in the dumpster, her body in the woods, the files on Stephen's phone, but also the pattern of predatory behavior that had now surfaced. Neighbors were interviewed, with several stating they'd often seen Stephen's car making odd trips at unusual hours. One neighbor specifically recalled the morning of February 26th, saying she saw Stephen hurriedly dragging what looked like a large duffel bag toward his car, before speeding off. Another mentioned hearing loud banging sounds around 6:30 a.m. that morning, followed by an eerie silence. The narrative investigators were piecing together was grim. Stephen, long suspected of abusing Malene in secret, may have acted violently when she resisted or threatened to expose him. The attempted phone reset, the disposal of her belongings, and the false alibi all pointed to a carefully staged cover-up that unraveled with each new piece of evidence. The court filings painted Stephen as not only deceptive but manipulative, someone who thought he could outsmart both technology and law enforcement. Yet the persistence of investigators, combined with digital recovery techniques, stripped away his facade, layer by layer. By mid-March, prosecutors announced their intent to seek the maximum penalty allowed by law, citing the case's heinous, cruel, and calculated nature. The community, still reeling from the discovery of Malene's fate, organized vigils and memorials in her honor. Flowers and stuffed animals piled outside the school she was never dropped off at, a reminder of innocence stolen too soon. But the investigation wasn't over. Detectives continued to dig deeper into Stephen's past, determined to find out if Malene was his only victim, if his darkness stretched further than anyone could have imagined. Stephen appeared to be more distraught about losing his bond with Malene than about his relationship with her mother. This troubling detail raised deeper concerns about the dynamics inside the household and Stephen's possible motives. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that authorities were piecing together a strong case against him. Recovered video evidence, disturbing digital files, and powerful witness testimonies painted a dark portrait of abuse, manipulation, and deception, one that would soon carry serious legal consequences. On March 6th, detectives interviewed Stephen's parents. They admitted their disapproval of his relationship with Malene's mother, Jennifer, citing her drug use and the toxic influence it had on their son. They described an unsettling household dynamic where both Stephen and Jennifer often slept excessively, neglecting responsibilities and worsening their mental health issues. During this interview, Stephen's mother revealed something especially alarming. She had once found the torso of a sex doll in his bedroom, fueling even more suspicion about his behavior that same day. Detectives spoke with two of Jennifer's roommates. One recalled hearing loud noises coming from the upstairs bedroom, where Stephen and Malene had reportedly been alone together. The noises raised unsettling questions about what may have occurred that night, especially since Jennifer had reassured her roommate that Stephen would never harm her daughter after weeks of mounting evidence. On March 12, 2024, the Orange County State Attorney's Office filed 60 criminal counts against Stephen Stearns. These included 8 counts of sexual battery on a child under 125 counts of sexual battery on a child aged 12 to 18 by custodial authority, 7 counts of lewd or lascivious molestation, and 40 counts of unlawful possession of child sexual abuse material the following day. Detectives interviewed Melene's best friend. She explained that Malene always texted her every morning without fail, but on the day she disappeared, there were no messages, an early and chilling sign that something was wrong. By March 21st, CM Chief Betty Holland held a press conference describing the case as intricate and ongoing. She emphasized that everyone close to Malene, including her own mother, remained a suspect until the truth was proven. The District 9 Medical Examiner's Office announced that Malene's autopsy could not be released to the public due to confidentiality laws. However, recordings of multiple 911 calls tied to the case were released, featuring 2 different voices contacting dispatchers on the morning of her disappearance. Then came a twist. On April 10th, while in jail, Stephen called his father. In the recorded call, he expressed remorse and confusion, saying, "You know, I would never have wanted that for Malene." His words hinted at denial, or perhaps an attempt to downplay his role in what had happened the very next day. Stephen's father contacted authorities after discovering a hard drive in his storage unit, a device Stephen had previously claimed was inside his own bedroom. On April 12th, police retrieved the hard drive and 2 USB drives, though the hard drive itself revealed nothing. One of the USBs contained over 35,000 images of child pornography. With this damning evidence, a grand jury indicted Stephen on first-degree murder charges. On April 24th, Chief Holland declared that investigators had found proof Stephen made deliberate efforts to hide Malene's belongings and conceal her body before she was even reported missing. The state attorney's office soon announced it would seek the death penalty. Detectives re-interviewed Jennifer on April 18th. She admitted that on the night Malene vanished, she had come home late to find Stephen and Malene together. Shockingly, she confessed she allowed them to sleep in the same bed, claiming she trusted Stephen, a decision that investigators and the public alike found deeply troubling. By June 10th, prosecutors formally filed their motion to pursue the death penalty against Stephen Stearns. The community, devastated by Melene's tragic death, remained on edge as the trial approached. Vigils were held in her memory, her schoolmates and neighbors leaving flowers, candles, and stuffed animals. The case sparked widespread conversations about child safety, vigilance, and the hidden dangers lurking behind seemingly ordinary relationships. Meling's story became a chilling reminder of the need to protect vulnerable children and to listen when their voices or silences signaled danger for investigators, prosecutors, and the grieving community. The quest for justice pressed on, determined to ensure her short life would not be forgotten. Kendra's dedication to her studies paid off. After completing dental school, she moved to Dallas, Texas, where she quickly built a reputation as a compassionate pediatric dentist. Her colleagues admired her ability to calm nervous children in the chair, often using humor and warmth to ease their fears. Parents trusted her deeply, describing her as someone who treated every child as if they were her own. Beyond her professional life, Kendra was known for her adventurous spirit. She loved traveling, volunteering on mission trips, and spending time with friends and family. In 2015, her life seemed to be falling perfectly into place. She was excelling in her career and had recently begun dating a successful anesthesiologist named Ricardo Paniaga. The couple appeared deeply in love, often posting joyful pictures of their travels and outings together, but beneath the surface, a storm was brewing. Ricardo's ex-girlfriend, Brenda Delgado, struggled to accept the end of their relationship, consumed by jealousy and anger. Brenda began following Ricardo and Kendra's relationship obsessively. She stalked their social media accounts, tracked their movements, and grew increasingly resentful of the happiness the new couple shared. By late summer of 2015, Brenda's bitterness had morphed into something far more sinister. Investigators would later reveal that she plotted an elaborate scheme to eliminate Kendra, enlisting the help of two acquaintances to carry out her plan on the evening of September 2nd, 2015. As Kendra returned home to her Dallas apartment after a long day at the clinic, she parked her car in the complex garage, unaware that danger was lurking nearby. Kendra's warmth and patience made her a natural with children, which is why she specialized in pediatric dentistry after years of hard work. She built a thriving practice in Dallas, Texas, where she was admired for both her skill and compassion. Friends described her as someone who could light up any room, a devoted daughter, and a woman whose life seemed full of promise. In 2015, Kendra had recently started dating Dr. Ricardo Paniagua, a respected anesthesiologist. Their relationship quickly grew serious, filled with travel, laughter, and the excitement of building a future together. But outside their happy circle, someone else was watching. Ricardo's ex-girlfriend, Brenda Delgado. Brenda had never accepted that Ricardo had moved on to friends. She portrayed herself as heartbroken, but privately, her emotions had twisted into jealousy and obsession. She tracked Kendra's every move on social media, scrolled through pictures of her and Ricardo, and stewed in resentment. Detectives would later reveal that Brenda wasn't just nursing a broken heart, she was planning revenge. Unable to let go, she orchestrated a chilling plot, enlisting two accomplices to eliminate the woman she viewed as her rival. On the evening of September 2nd, 2015, Kendra parked her car in her apartment garage after a long day at work. As she stepped out, she was ambushed and shot once in the back of the head. Neighbors heard the gunfire and dialed 911, but by the time paramedics arrived, it was too late. Kendra's promising life had been cut short. The senselessness of the crime shocked Dallas. Who could want a kind, young dentist dead? Detectives immediately focused on Kendra's personal relationships, and Ricardo told them about Brenda, his ex, who had shown signs of anger and obsession. That tip would blow the case wide open. Investigators quickly pieced together the timeline of Kendra Hatcher's last moments. Surveillance cameras in the apartment garage revealed a black Jeep Cherokee circling the area just before the shooting. Witnesses reported seeing a woman driving the getaway car and a man fleeing the scene within days. Detectives identified the shooter as Christopher Love, a man with a violent past, and the getaway driver as Crystal Cortez, a young single mother. When police brought Crystal in for questioning, she cracked under pressure. What she told them stunned investigators. Crystal admitted that she had been recruited by Brenda Delgado. Ricardo's ex-girlfriend Brenda had promised her money and status if she helped carry out the murder. According to Crystal, Brenda carefully planned every detail. She even tracked Kendra's movements using a stolen iPad that Ricardo had once given her during their relationship. Brenda knew exactly where Kendra would be on the night of the attack. Pieces fell into place. Brenda, consumed by jealousy, had orchestrated the murder-for-hire plot. She enlisted Christopher Love as the gunman, offering him drugs and money, while Crystal served as his driver as prosecutors prepared charges. One shocking twist emerged. Brenda Delgado was gone by the time investigators were ready to arrest her. She had vanished. The FBI quickly added her to the 10 most wanted fugitives list, a rare designation for a woman, and warned that she was dangerous for months. She evaded capture, sparking a global manhunt. Authorities suspected she had fled to Mexico, leveraging her dual citizenship and family connections to hide. Crystal Cortez struck a plea deal for her role in the crime, while Christopher Love stood trial. In October 2018, Love was found guilty of capital murder and sentenced to death. The case against Brenda, however, remained open until a crucial tip led Mexican authorities to a modest apartment in Torreon, Coahuila, where she was hiding on April 8, 2016. Brenda Delgado was arrested and later extradited to the U.S., facing overwhelming evidence, digital records, witness testimony, and the words of her own accomplices. She was convicted of capital murder in 2019 and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Kendra's family finally had justice. Though nothing could erase the pain of losing her, her story became a tragic reminder of how jealousy and obsession can spiral into deadly violence. In 2015, at only 35 years old, Kendra finally achieved her dream. She landed a position at a dental practice in Dallas, Texas. Serving a low-income community, the clinic was committed to outreach and improving access to care, which matched her passion perfectly. Patients loved her warmth and dedication, especially children, who quickly bonded with her. Kendra's personal life was also blossoming as a single, successful woman. It was no surprise that she caught the eye of Dr. Ricardo Ricky Paniaga, a dermatology resident originally from California. Their chemistry was undeniable after just 4 months of dating. They were already talking about moving in together and even planning a wedding for those who knew Kendra best. It was heartwarming to see her so happy that September. Kendra and Ricky had planned a romantic trip to Cancun, but tragedy struck before they could go. On the evening of September 2, 2015. Kendra was driving home after work while texting Ricky, who was waiting at her apartment. They were giddy with excitement, discussing their beach getaway set for the next day. Ricky mentioned he was stepping out for food and asked her to text when she arrived home. Meanwhile, in the same apartment complex, a young man named Hashem was walking with a friend toward his car in the parking garage. Suddenly, they heard frantic screams followed by a series of loud pops. Gunfire. Moments later, a black Jeep Cherokee sped past them and tore out of the garage. Alarmed, Hashem and his friend followed the vehicle out. As they exited, Hashem noticed a woman lying motionless beside a white Toyota Camry. Horrified, he pulled over, called 911, and reported that she was bleeding heavily from the neck. By the time police and paramedics arrived, the victim was already dead. Using her car registration and license, investigators confirmed the victim was Dr. Kendra Hatcher. She had been shot at close range. The bullet entered through the back of her head and exited through her chin. Gunshot residue on her hands suggested she may have been forced to raise them behind her head before being executed nearby. Investigators found a shell casing from a .40 caliber weapon and, curiously, a handgun magazine lying on the ground. It appeared the shooter had accidentally released it in the chaos. Unfortunately, the magazine had no usable fingerprints or DNA. One major clue, however, was that Kendra's purse was missing at first glance. Detectives theorized this could have been a robbery gone wrong. As police secured the crime scene, Ricky grew frantic. His texts and calls to Kendra went unanswered until detectives informed him of her death. His grief seemed genuine, but as her boyfriend and last known contact, he had to be questioned. After an interview, he was released due to lack of evidence. The real break came from security footage in the garage. The video showed a black Jeep Cherokee tailgating another car into the building around 7:15 p.m. Roughly 20 minutes later, Kendra's Camry pulled into her assigned spot. A figure exited the Jeep, moved out of frame toward her car, then quickly ran back and climbed into the passenger seat before the Jeep sped away. Though the footage was grainy, one critical detail emerged. The driver was a woman. Detectives circulated a still image of her face, along with the Jeep's description. 2 days later, a man named Jose Ortiz came forward. He identified the Jeep as his own, pointing out unique rims and trim details. Determined to clear his name, Jose explained he had lent the car to a friend on the night of September 2nd, a woman named Brenda Delgado. He also insisted Brenda couldn't have been the driver, since the two of them were eating dinner at Chili's during the time of the murder. Still, Jose admitted something chilling. Brenda had recently made threats. Detectives grew increasingly suspicious when they learned more about Brenda Delgado's connection to a black Jeep Cherokee that had appeared on the news. The Jeep belonged to Jose Ortiz, Brenda's boyfriend at the time. When Jose confronted her, about its involvement in the crime. Brenda warned him not to involve the police, hinting that his immigration status could become an issue. She even offered to have the Jeep repainted so it would no longer match the vehicle investigators were searching for. This revelation caught the detectives' attention on September 4th. Just 2 days after the murder, they called Brenda in for questioning. Brenda, who had immigrated from Mexico as a child, was by all accounts quiet, polite, and ambitious. At 33, she was studying to become a dental hygienist, praised by professors for her dedication and potential. Yet when asked if she knew the victim, Kendra Hatcher, Brenda flatly denied it. She claimed she had spent the evening of September 2nd with Jose at Chili's and even presented a receipt to prove her alibi, but detectives noticed something strange. Why would Brenda still have a dinner receipt from 2 nights earlier, conveniently ready to produce? Their doubts only deepened when Brenda tried to shift suspicion. She told them that her friend, Crystal Cortez, had borrowed Jose's Jeep. That night Crystal was quickly brought in for interrogation. At first, she painted herself as an unwilling participant. She said she had borrowed the Jeep to take her son to the park, when suddenly, a man with a gun jumped into the back seat. Terrified, she claimed she drove under duress to an apartment garage, where the man got out. Shots rang out, and then he returned, ordering her to drive him away. But surveillance footage told a different story. It showed Crystal entering the garage alone, without her son. She was parked and waiting calmly, not frantically. The footage contradicted nearly every part of her story. Pressed by detectives, Crystal's version of events began to crumble eventually. She admitted her role in the plot. She confessed that the attack on Kendra was planned, but insisted she hadn't known the man with her had a gun. According to Crystal, the plan was only to rob Kendra, but when Kendra resisted, the man pulled the trigger under pressure. Crystal revealed the mastermind, Brenda Delgado. The motive, she explained, was jealousy. Brenda believed Kendra was dating Ricardo Ricky Paniagua, the same man Brenda had been in a long, complicated relationship with for over 2 years. Their romance had ended for good in February 2015, just weeks before Ricardo met Kendra. To Brenda, Kendra wasn't just another woman, she was the one who had replaced her. Detectives now had their answer. What looked like a random killing was, in fact, a murder for hire, fueled by obsession and revenge. Brenda's obsession with Ricardo did not fade after their breakup. Instead, it intensified. Friends later revealed that she constantly monitored Ricardo's social media, tracking where he went and who he was with. When Ricardo began dating Kendra, Brenda became consumed with jealousy. She couldn't accept being replaced, especially by someone as accomplished and admired as Kendra. During interrogations, Crystal Cortez revealed how deeply Brenda had pulled her into the scheme. Brenda often portrayed herself as a victim, claiming that Ricardo had betrayed her, that Kendra had stolen her happiness, and that she was left with nothing. To Crystal, Brenda painted Kendra as the obstacle standing between her and the life she deserved. The plot, however, went far beyond jealousy-fueled gossip. Brenda promised Crystal money, cars, and financial support if she helped. She even introduced Crystal to the man who would ultimately become the triggerman, a man named Christopher Love. Unlike Crystal, Christopher had a long criminal record and was no stranger to violence. Brenda assured them both that Kendra was an easy target and would not put up much of a fight. Detectives later uncovered how meticulous Brenda had been in her planning. She had tracked Kendra's schedule, monitoring when she arrived home and where she parked. Brenda even used her background in dentistry to manipulate her circle of acquaintances, convincing them she was simply a heartbroken woman trying to move on. In reality, she was orchestrating a murder for hire plot under the guise of casual conversations. Crystal's confession shifted the investigation dramatically. The narrative of a random robbery gone wrong no longer made sense. What emerged instead was a picture of a carefully calculated attack, rooted in Brenda's obsession with Ricardo and fueled by her growing hatred of Kendra. By the time detectives pieced this together, Brenda was already slipping through their fingers, and that's why she wanted her gone. Detectives immediately recognized this as another one of Brenda's lies. There was no evidence that Kendra had ever stolen drugs. She had a successful career, a fiancé, and no reason to be involved in criminal activity. But for Christopher Love, a man with a long rap sheet and a history of dealing with narcotics, Brenda's story was persuasive enough to draw him in. Brenda had manipulated him by offering not only money, but also drugs as payment. This explained why Christopher was willing to put his freedom on the line for someone he barely knew to detectives. The picture was now becoming clear. Brenda had orchestrated everything she had promised Crystal. $500 to be the getaway driver. She had promised Christopher drugs in exchange for pulling the trigger. And she had carefully crafted lies to motivate both of them, convincing Crystal it was just a robbery, and convincing Christopher that Kendra had wronged her. But the evidence told a very different story. The gun in Christopher's car matched the shell casings from the crime scene. The $500 selfie on Crystal's phone tied Brenda directly to the payments and the cell phone records showing Brenda and Crystal meeting the same day as Kendra's death destroyed any notion that this was coincidence with mounting pressure. Investigators realized they were dealing with a calculated love triangle, murder for hire scheme where Brenda was at the center, pulling the strings, and Kendra was the tragic victim. Christopher claimed that Brenda told him Kendra had stolen drugs and needed to be punished. But detectives quickly verified that Kendra had no involvement with drugs. She was a respected children's dentist, well liked in her community. With this new information, Christopher was charged with capital murder and taken into custody at the Dallas County Jail. Brenda, meanwhile, was initially held, but later released after paying a fine for an unpaid parking ticket on September 5, 2015. Once free, she immediately fled, boarding a bus toward the Mexican border in a bid to evade capture. Law enforcement, however, acted quickly, issuing a public alert and coordinating efforts across the Dallas Police Department, the FBI, and Mexican authorities. After months of investigation, Brenda was finally located in Mexico. In April 2016, extradition required that the United States agree not to seek the death penalty, a condition Mexico demanded. Negotiations were successful, and Brenda was brought back to the U.S. to face trial. The prosecution's case strengthened when Crystal Cortez agreed to a plea deal in exchange for a reduced sentence. Crystal admitted her involvement as the getaway driver, receiving 35 years in prison during Brenda's trial in 2019. Crystal testified that on the night of Kendra's murder, while Brenda dined at Chili's to maintain her alibi, Crystal and Christopher hid in Kendra's apartment parking garage. When Kendra arrived in her white Toyota Camry, Christopher exited the car, shot Kendra, took her purse, and returned to the Jeep, where Crystal waited. Brenda's defense attorney argued that the murder for hire theory didn't align with Brenda's personality. They suggested that Crystal and Christopher had acted independently and falsely implicated Brenda. However, evidence including cell phone records showing Brenda and Crystal met that day, and the $500 payment overwhelmed the defense. Ultimately, the jury found Brenda guilty of capital murder, sentencing her to life without parole. On October 31, 2018, Christopher Love was also convicted and received the death penalty. For Carly Gregg case on March 19, 2024. Heath Smiley returned home from work, unaware of the horror awaiting him. Moments after entering the house, a gunshot rang out. His 15-year-old stepdaughter, Carly, had shot his wife, Ashley, in the neck. Heath narrowly escaped with his life in a frantic 911 call. He reported the chaos, blood everywhere, and Carly had fled the scene. The shocking question loomed: what could drive a teenager to commit such an act? Despite evidence, surveillance footage, and witness accounts, the case was far from straightforward. Carly was an exceptional student who had recently displayed signs of distress and was undergoing therapy for anxiety. Her mother, Ashley, a dedicated algebra teacher, had discovered Carly's use of marijuana via vape pens, further straining their relationship. After returning home around 4 p.m., Ashley confronted Carly in her bedroom. Surveillance footage captured Carly holding an object behind her back, later revealed to be a firearm. The confrontation quickly escalated. Carly fired 3 shots, hitting Ashley immediately after. Carly texted a friend for help, showing both panic and awareness of the gravity of her actions. When Carly's friend arrived, she was greeted with a chilling question: "Are you squeamish around dead bodies?" Carly led her friend into the bedroom, allegedly confessing, "I put 3 in my mom, and I have 3 more for my stepdad. When he gets home." She then tampered with evidence, removing an interior camera and placing it in the refrigerator, indicating premeditation. Heath Smiley, Carly's stepfather, had received a text from Ashley earlier about his expected return, arriving home at approximately 5:03 p.m. He initially noticed nothing unusual, but as he opened the kitchen door, a gunshot rang out. The case would soon reveal hidden family tensions, mental health struggles, and unexpected twists that left a small Mississippi town reeling. As Heath Smiley stepped onto the threshold of his home, a gunshot rang out. Carly was waiting, poised to fire, but fortunately, she missed her target. Heath sustained a grazing wound to his neck and quickly attempted to pursue Carly as she fled. Outside, in a state of shock, he placed a frantic 911 call, reporting, "I think my wife has been shot. I just got home, and there is blood everywhere." His voice conveyed urgency as he described being injured and explained that Carly had fled the scene with a firearm, which he believed was left on the kitchen counter. He also provided a description of Carly and the direction she ran toward Magnolia Place. This information proved critical for law enforcement in initiating a rapid response. Deputies from the Rankin County Sheriff's Office arrived within minutes. They found Heath visibly injured outside the home and immediately called for medical assistance while securing the scene inside. Officers discovered Ashley lying in her bedroom, multiple gunshot wounds confirming she had been shot at close range. The scene was chaotic, evidence of a violent confrontation, clearly visibly. Law enforcement's initial efforts focused on securing the crime scene and collecting evidence, including ballistic samples from inside and outside the home. Surveillance footage from both interior and exterior cameras was reviewed to construct a timeline of events leading up to the shooting. Heath's account of the incident, including Carly's actions immediately before and after the attack, became critical in understanding her state of mind. Authorities launched a search for Carly, using outdoor surveillance footage to track her movements. A Mississippi Highway Patrol helicopter assisted in locating her, and Carly was apprehended approximately 30 minutes after the shooting without further incident. She was taken into custody and charged with multiple offenses, including murder and attempted murder. The rapid and methodical response by law enforcement laid the foundation for a complex legal case against Carly Gregg following the shooting. Carly was held at the Rankin County Jail in Brandon, Mississippi, awaiting trial. Charged as an adult, she faced murder, attempted murder, and evidence tampering charges. Her $1 million bond reflected the severity of the allegations during this period. Carly's legal team began preparing her defense, while the prosecution relied on the evidence collected at the scene, including eyewitness accounts and forensic analysis. Carly pleaded not guilty to all charges. Mental health evaluations were conducted to assess Carly's psychological state, examining her history of anxiety and prior therapy sessions. These evaluations became central to the defense's argument, highlighting the role her mental health may have played in the incident. In the months following her arrest, Carly was offered a plea deal, resulting in a 40-year sentence, which she rejected, choosing to proceed to trial. As the trial approached, Carly's attorneys focused on building a comprehensive defense addressing both factual elements of the case and her mental health concerns. This involved analyzing surveillance footage, reviewing text messages, and consulting mental health experts. The complexity of the case raised challenging questions about accountability, intent, and the influence of mental health on criminal behavior. August 19th, a courtroom drama unfolded as Judge Dwayne Arthur questioned the defense's handling of a critical mental health evaluation report. Although Carly had been deemed competent to stand trial, The delayed submission of the report raised concerns about potential strategic manipulation. Defense attorneys Bridget Todd and Kevin Camp explained that the delay was unintentional due to the complexity of obtaining the report, assuring the court it would be shared with the prosecution immediately. Judge Arthur expressed skepticism, emphasizing that transparency was essential for a fair trial. Attention then shifted to the mental health assessments of Carly. Dr. Amanda Gugo, a psychologist, testified that medication changes in the months preceding the shooting may have influenced Carly's mental state. However, she acknowledged limitations regarding her ability to evaluate all potential side effects. Recognizing this, the defense retained Dr. Mark Webb to conduct a comprehensive mental health assessment, which they planned to present as evidence as the trial drew near. On September 10, 6 days before the start, the defense filed a motion to exclude a key piece of evidence, a urine test conducted upon Carly's admission to the detention center. They argued that the test had been administered without proper authorization and should be considered inadmissible. Prosecutors countered, asserting the test was essential for safety purposes and that Carly had voluntarily admitted to it. The defense argued that evidence of Carly's marijuana use was relevant to understanding her mental state at the time of the incident. However, Judge Dwayne Arthur ruled in favor of the prosecution, denying the defense's motion to suppress the drug test. He determined that the search had been reasonable given the circumstances and potential risks involved in a separate move. The judge issued a gag order, prohibiting Carly's attorneys from speaking publicly about the case after allegations arose that the defense had commented on case details, potentially violating procedural rules. First day of Carly Gregg's murder trial unfolded under a somber courtroom atmosphere. The prosecution presented key evidence, including the 911 call recorded by Heath Smiley and body camera footage from law enforcement responding to the scene. Carly, now 15, faced charges of murdering her mother, Ashley Smiley, and attempting to kill her stepfather, Heath. On March 19, 2024, Rankin County dispatcher Kevin Collins testified first, playing the 911 call, in which Heath's voice sounded frantic and hysterical as he described the shooting and the discovery of his wife's lifeless body. Next, Deputy Hunter Lewis's body camera footage was shown, capturing the chaotic scene inside the Smiley home and Heath's distraught account of events. The jury witnessed the grim reality of Ashley's death and the aftermath of the shooting during opening statements. The prosecution portrayed Carly's hidden struggles, including a secret relationship with a boyfriend, her social media activity, and self-harm behaviors. They alleged that Carly had an altercation with a friend at school that day, which escalated when her mother discovered vape pens in her room. Evidence presented included ballistic tests and gunshot residue on Carly's hands, supporting claims that she had fired a .357 Magnum handgun she had concealed behind her back. The defense presented a contrasting narrative, portraying Carly as a loving daughter and good student who may have acted out of fear and confusion when her stepfather unexpectedly returned home. Their argument emphasized Carly's emotional and mental state rather than a deliberate intent to commit murder. On the second day of the trial, Heath Smiley testified in detail. He described his positive relationship with Carly and his admiration for Ashley as a mother. Heath recounted the moments leading up to the shooting, including receiving a text from Ashley and arriving home to find Carly with a gun. He described the struggle to disarm her, the gunshots, and Carly's hysterical demeanor afterward. Heath also noted searching the house for an intruder but finding none. Friends of Carly testified about her character and behavioral changes, describing her as generally well-behaved but noting growing drug use and concerning statements about harming her parents. One friend, B, recounted being the friend Carly had called for help after shooting her mother. BW testified that Carly admitted to the shooting and expressed a desire to harm Heath. This friend also recalled hearing gunshots after fleeing to the backyard, revealing the trauma of the event. The defense highlighted Carly's relationship with her biological father, Kevin Gregg, whose history of drug use had negatively impacted her. Heath's testimony about Kevin's behavior, including forcing Carly to drink, at a young age, supported the defense's argument that Carly's actions were influenced by her volatile mental health rather than premeditation. The defense stressed that Carly's love for her mother and the stressors in her life created a perfect storm for the tragic events in the third day. The trial delved further into Carly's mental health history. Dr. Andrew Clark, a child and adolescent psychiatrist, testified for the defense, diagnosing Carly with bipolar II disorder, a condition marked by mood fluctuations and periods of mania and depression. Dr. Clark presented Carly's medical records, highlighting long-standing struggles with anxiety and depression, including incidents of self-harm. Analysis of Carly's journals and sketchbooks revealed disturbing thoughts of despair, hopelessness, and aggression. The defense argued that her mental health issues, combined with stress from family dynamics, such as losing a sister and experiencing her parents' divorce, contributed to the violent incident. The prosecution challenged Dr. Clark's findings, questioning the reliability of Carly's self-reported symptoms and arguing that she understood the difference between right and wrong at the time of the shooting. The defense countered by emphasizing the impact of her strained relationship with Kevin, Greg, and the resulting emotional trauma, reinforcing that Carly's mental state was a critical factor in understanding the tragedies. The trial progressed. The jury faced the complex task of weighing evidence from multiple sources: witness testimony, surveillance footage, ballistic analysis, and mental health evaluations. The case required them to navigate the intersection of adolescent psychology, family dynamics, and criminal accountability to determine Carly Gregg's guilt or innocence. As the trial progressed, the jury faced the complex task of weighing evidence from multiple sources: witness testimony, surveillance footage, ballistic analysis, and mental health evaluations. The case required them to navigate the intersection of adolescent psychology, family dynamics, and criminal accountability to determine Carly Gregg's guilt or innocence. As the trial progressed into the subsequent days, both the prosecution and defense delved deeper into Carly Gregg's mental state, seeking to influence the jury's perception of her actions. The prosecution emphasized that Carly had planned her mother's shooting, pointing to evidence of concealment and the attempt to tamper with surveillance footage. They argued that these deliberate actions indicated awareness and intent, asserting that regardless of her age or mental health issues, Carly understood the severity of her actions. The defense countered by presenting expert testimony from Dr. Mark Webb, a psychologist who had conducted a comprehensive evaluation of Carly's mental health. Dr. Webb explained that Carly's behavior was consistent with severe adolescent emotional dysregulation, compounded by bipolar II disorder, anxiety, and trauma from her family environment. He noted that her medication changes in the months leading up to the shooting could have amplified impulsivity and confusion, impairing her judgment. Dr. Webb stressed that Carly's intentions were not necessarily malicious, but influenced by a combination of psychological instability and external stressors. The court also reviewed Carly's digital footprint, including her text messages, social media activity, and journal entries, which revealed ongoing struggles with depression, anxiety, and feelings of hopelessness. The defense argued that these records painted a portrait of a deeply troubled teenager pushed to a breaking point, not a cold-blooded murderer. Friends and teachers provided further context, testifying that Carly had previously exhibited signs of anxiety, mood swings, and emotional distress, but had never displayed violent tendencies before. The defense used these statements to reinforce the argument that her actions were an aberration caused by her mental health struggles, rather than a reflection of her character. The prosecution, however, focused on the premeditation aspect of the case. They argued that Carly's retrieval of the firearm, concealment behind her back, and the attempt to hide the interior camera indicated calculated steps to commit and cover up the crime. They urged the jury to consider that these actions demonstrated awareness of right and wrong, highlighting her ability to plan despite her psychological challenges. Throughout the trial, the tension in the courtroom remained high. Family members, friends, and community members followed each day with a mix of horror, disbelief, and sorrow. The case garnered national attention due to the shocking nature of a teenager allegedly murdering her own mother, discussions about adolescent mental health, gun safety in homes, and family dynamics were brought into public discourse on the final days of testimony. Both sides made their closing arguments. The prosecution reiterated that Carly's actions were deliberate and deadly, pointing to forensic evidence, eyewitness accounts, and her own admissions to friends as proof of intent. The defense reminded the jury of Carly's psychological history, trauma, and the circumstances that contributed to her impaired judgment. They emphasized that while the outcome was tragic, it was a consequence of a deeply troubled mind, rather than premeditated malice. After closing statements, the jury began deliberations, tasked with weighing the complex evidence and testimony presented over several intense trial days. They had to balance considerations of mental health, age, intent, and culpability in reaching a verdict that reflected both justice and compassion. Ultimately, the case of Carly Gregg raised difficult questions about adolescent accountability, the impact of mental illness, and the tragic consequences that can arise when psychological struggles intersect with accessible firearms. It became a defining example for both legal and mental health professionals, highlighting the need for early intervention, family support, and careful attention to the mental well-being of teenagers in high-stress environments. Story 5. In October 1975, the shocking and brutal murder of 15-year-old Martha Moxley sent shockwaves through the town of Greenwich, Connecticut. Martha's body was discovered beaten with a golf club, an object later traced back to a prominent local family with deep political connections. The crime left the Moxley family devastated and launched a long, painful pursuit of justice that spanned decades. Initially, the investigation seemed straightforward, with clues pointing towards certain individuals. However, as authorities dug deeper, conflicting evidence and hidden relationships complicated the case, leaving the town and the Moxley family questioning what truly transpired that night. The Moxleys had moved to Greenwich, seeking a safe and idyllic environment for their children. John and Martha, a bright and talented teenager, quickly adapted to her new surroundings. She was known for her intelligence, charm, and beauty, qualities that drew many friends and admirers. Martha shared a close bond with her brother and was excelling academically, demonstrating a passion for learning and an insatiable curiosity. On the evening of the murder, Martha's social life intersected with complex social dynamics in Greenwich. She had interactions with local teens, some of whom were connected to influential families in the area. These connections would later become pivotal in the investigation, complicating the search for the perpetrator. The discovery of her body in the Moxley backyard shocked the community. Law enforcement quickly identified the golf club as the murder weapon, raising suspicions due to its connection to the high-profile family. Initial reports and witness testimonies painted a confusing picture. Some claimed to have seen Martha with certain individuals earlier that evening, while others provided contradictory accounts. As the investigation progressed, the police faced immense pressure from both the public and the powerful families involved. Leads were mishandled, and early evidence was lost or overlooked, frustrating the Moxleys and delaying justice. Despite these setbacks, the family remained determined to uncover the truth and hold the responsible parties accountable. The case soon evolved into a decades-long battle, marked by legal challenges, media scrutiny, and persistent advocacy from Martha's family. Each revelation seemed to open new questions, exposing the complex social and political dynamics that had shielded the perpetrators. Martha Moxley's murder remains a haunting example of how privilege, influence, and procedural failures can impede justice, even in the face of overwhelming tragedy. The case would later become emblematic of the challenges faced by families seeking accountability in high-profile crime struggles of the young defendant and their possible influence on her actions. While the prior testimony had established the facts of the shooting, The courtroom now turned its focus to the psychological factors that may have contributed to that tragic day. On the fourth day, the prosecution called several rebuttal witnesses to counter the defense's claim that Carly's mental health rendered her incapable of understanding her actions. First to testify was Olivia Labor, a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner who had conducted a thorough evaluation of Carly in January 2024. Labo confirmed that during her sessions, Carly had explicitly denied experiencing hallucinations or hearing voices, even after adjustments were made to her medication to address anxiety and depression. The testimony highlighted that while Carly was under professional care, there were no overt signs of psychosis that could explain the violent outburst. Next, the prosecution presented Rebecca Kirk, a licensed professional counselor who had met with Carly 9 times before the shooting. Kirk testified that Carly had never expressed suicidal or homicidal thoughts during their sessions. While she acknowledged Carly's struggles with depression and anxiety, Kirk emphasized that such symptoms were not uncommon among adolescents and did not automatically indicate a propensity for extreme violence. The final witness for the state that day was Dr. Jason Pickett, a forensic psychiatrist tasked with evaluating Carly's mental state against Mississippi's legal criteria for insanity. Dr. Pickett meticulously analyzed Carly's journal entries, statements, and the circumstances surrounding the crime. His conclusion was unequivocal. Carly understood the nature and wrongfulness of her actions. On March 19, 2024, some of her writings, he noted, were theatrical, perhaps dramatized for effect, but others revealed concerning behavioral patterns. Crucially, he emphasized that a recent switch to a low dose of Lexapro could not have precipitated the violent acts she committed. This testimony directly challenged the defense's expert, Dr. Andrew Clark, who had argued that Carly was experiencing a severe mental health crisis at the time. Dr. Clark had highlighted her struggles with mood swings, eating disorders, self-harm, and auditory hallucinations as evidence of her impaired state. The contrasting testimonies presented the jury with a nuanced but deeply complicated picture of Carly's mental and emotional condition. By the morning of the 5th day, the trial reached a pivotal moment. After deliberating throughout the previous day, the jury returned with their verdict. Judge Dwayne Arthur announced in a solemn tone that Carly Gregg was found guilty on all 3 charges: murder, attempted murder, and tampering with evidence. The verdict sent a heavy silence through the courtroom, as both the gravity of the crimes and the age of the defendant weighed on all present during the sentencing phase. The judge considered the seriousness of the offenses, the evidence presented, and the lack of remorse demonstrated by Carly. She was sentenced to life in prison, without the possibility of parole, for the murder of her mother and the attempted murder of her stepfather. Additionally, she received a 10-year sentence for tampering with evidence, which was to run concurrently, ensuring that her total time in prison would remain life without parole. The courtroom was filled with emotion as Carly broke down, grief-stricken and overwhelmed by despair. Ashley Smiley's parents, Keith Smiley, and other relatives also expressed their anguish during the sentencing. Both prosecution and defense delivered their closing arguments. Prosecutor Catherine Newman emphasized Carly's understanding of the consequences of her actions, arguing that the crime was deliberate and premeditated. In contrast, defense attorneys Bridget Todd and Kevin Camp pleaded for leniency, highlighting Carly's mental health struggles, her love for her mother, and her positive relationship with her stepfather. The jury deliberated for 2 hours before unanimously agreeing on the sentence. Judge Arthur, aligning with the jury's recommendation, imposed the life sentence without parole. Despite the outcome, Carly's legal battle was not yet over. Within weeks, she sought a new trial, raising questions about whether she had made the right choice by rejecting a 40-year plea deal in favor of pursuing a full trial. The tragic story of Martha Moxley began in October 1975, when the 15-year-old's brutal murder shook the community of Greenwich, Connecticut. Martha was discovered beaten to death with a golf club, a weapon traced to the home of a prominent local family with deep political connections. The murder left the Moxley family devastated and marked the beginning of a decades-long struggle for justice at first glance. The investigation appeared straightforward, yet, as new evidence surfaced and witnesses came forward, the case grew increasingly complex, raising more questions than answers. Martha's parents had moved to Greenwich seeking a safe and idyllic environment for their children. John and Martha, confident in the town's reputation for security, Martha quickly stood out as a bright, intelligent, and charismatic teenager. She was known for her captivating personality, academic excellence, and close relationship with her brother. Her love of learning and intellectual curiosity made her both admired and well-liked among peers. The night of the murder, Martha's social interactions intersected with the town's intricate social dynamics, which included influential families and powerful political ties. These connections would later complicate the investigation, as law enforcement faced intense scrutiny from both the community and politically connected individuals. Martha's body was found in her family's backyard, revealing multiple blunt force injuries, consistent with the golf club. Early evidence pointed to local teens with connections to prominent families, but witness testimonies were inconsistent, and critical leads were mishandled. Surveillance footage and eyewitness statements provided conflicting accounts, creating confusion and delaying justice for years. The Moxley family pursued accountability. Undeterred by setbacks, they worked tirelessly to ensure the investigation remained active, advocating for additional forensic testing, witness interviews, and legal proceedings. The case exposed how privilege and influence could obstruct justice, highlighting the systemic challenges faced in high-profile crimes. Over time, the investigation evolved into a multi-layered legal battle involving multiple suspects, shifting theories, and public scrutiny. Each new development shed light on Greenwich's social hierarchy and the pressures faced by law enforcement in pursuing leads connected to politically powerful families. Moxley's murder remains a haunting reminder of the fragility of justice when social status and connections interfere with accountability. The case has inspired widespread media coverage, books, and documentaries, ensuring that Martha's story and the quest for justice continue to resonate from the very outset. The investigation into Martha Moxley's murder faced significant obstacles, many of which were linked to the interference of the Skakel family. Their obstruction began early, most notably by denying investigators access to their sons' school and medical records documents that could have offered vital insights into Thomas and Michael Skakel's behavior, mental state, or potential health issues at the time of the crime. By withholding this information, the family prevented authorities from fully understanding possible motives, alibis, or patterns of conduct that might have implicated the bros. The interference did not stop there. The Skakel patriarch reportedly discouraged potential witnesses from coming forward or sharing what they knew about the night of the murder, making it increasingly difficult for law enforcement to collect first-hand accounts. Legal maneuvers were also employed to delay or obstruct investigative efforts, further hampering progress. The family's influence created a situation in which gathering sufficient evidence for a prosecution became extraordinarily challenging. The high-profile nature of the case, amplified by the Kennedy family connection, intensified public and media scrutiny. Thomas and Michael Kennedy, nephews of Robert F. Kennedy, quickly found themselves at the center of a media storm. Reporters and the public were eager to uncover any potential involvement or connection to Martha's death. Despite this scrutiny, the brothers consistently maintained their innocence. They denied attending the party where Martha was killed and insisted they had no knowledge of the events leading to her death. Their repeated denials only fueled public fascination and speculation, though no concrete evidence directly linked them to the crime. As the investigation unfolded, attention began to shift toward Kenneth Littleton, a live-in tutor for the Skakel brothers who had started working for the family just hours before Martha's murder. His proximity to the scene and close relationship with the boys raised suspicions, with some theorizing that he could have influenced or coerced them into committing the crime. Over the years, Conflicting accounts and evolving testimonies complicated the case further. Reports surfaced suggesting that Michael Skakel had, at one point, confessed to killing Martha with a golf club. Additionally, a former classmate testified that Michael received special treatment and allegedly boasted about evading punishment. Leveraging his family's connections, these claims only deepened public interest and added layers of complexity to the investigation. The Moxley case has inspired numerous books attempting to piece together the truth. Acclaimed writer Dominic Dunn explored the case in A Season in Purgatory, offering a detailed chronicle of the events surrounding Martha's death. Likewise, former police detective Mark Foreman, known for his role in the O.J. Simpson trial, released Murder in Greenwich, presenting his perspective on the investigation, analyzing evidence, and proposing theories about the identity of the killer. Both works examine the many possibilities and conspiracies considered by investigators, journalists, and those pursuing justice for Martha. One persistent theory involved the Skakel family itself from the beginning. Michael Skakel was a primary suspect, with suspicion surrounding him for decades. Yet despite intense media coverage, public scrutiny, and years of investigation, the case remained unresolved for an extended period, frustrating both authorities and the local community. Martha Moxley's murder left Greenwich in shock, igniting a nearly 2-decade-long investigation fraught with challenges. Finally, in 1998, after years of meticulous inquiry, a jury was convened to review the accumulated evidence, testimonies, and circumstantial details surrounding her death. The exhaustive investigation, spanning nearly 20 years, highlighted both the complexity of the case and the difficulties inherent in pursuing justice when powerful families and public perception intersect with criminal investigations. Sufficient evidence eventually emerged to charge Michael Skakel with the murder of Martha Moxley in January 2000. An arrest warrant was issued, and Skakel voluntarily turned himself in. He was quickly released on bail after posting a $500,000 bond on March 14, 2000. He was arraigned in juvenile court. However, despite being only 15 years old at the time of the crime, the judge ruled that Skakel would be tried as an adult. Michael Skakel's trial officially began on May 7, 2002. In Norwalk, Connecticut, prosecutors presented a compelling case that highlighted Skakel's connection to the crime and inconsistencies in his alibi. The defense countered, asserting that Skakel was innocent and could not have committed the murder. They claimed he had been at a cousin's house watching Monty Python at the time of the killing. The trial was highly publicized, attracting intense national and local media attention. The public closely followed each development, demanding justice for Martha. During proceedings, the prosecution presented a book proposal authored by which contained a startling admission. He had engaged in sexual activity in a tree on the evening of the murder. While the book placed him at the scene, it did not implicate him directly in Martha's death. Ultimately, the jury found Michael Skakel guilty of Martha Moxley's murder and sentenced him to 20 years to life in prison. The verdict was met with mixed reactions. Some expressed relief and satisfaction, while others raised concerns about the fairness of the trial. Skakel appealed his conviction on several grounds. One key argument was that, as a 15-year-old, at the time of the crime, he should have been tried in juvenile court rather than as an adult. Additionally, Skakel claimed prosecutorial misconduct, alleging that the prosecution had failed to disclose exculpatory evidence, which he argued violated his due process rights. In January 2006, the Connecticut Supreme Court rejected these claims and affirmed his conviction. In 2007, Skakel retained a new attorney and filed a motion for a retrial based on new evidence. According to his defense, a former classmate, Jaytan O'Bryant, cousin of late basketball star Kobe Bryant, alleged that on the night of the murder, he and friends had intended to sexually assault Martha. O'Bryant claimed that his mother had warned him not to come forward for fear of being implicated. This revelation renewed public and legal interest in the case, prompting fresh evidence. Hearings. Prosecutors, however, dismissed O'Bryant's account as potentially fabricated, suggesting he might have been motivated by financial gain. including selling a story or play about the case, despite the defense team hiring full-time investigators to uncover new evidence supporting Skakel's innocence. Their efforts were blocked when a Supreme Court judge denied his request for a new trial, citing the lack of credibility in O'Brien's testimony and affirming that prosecutors had acted appropriately during the original trial. Undeterred, appealed again to the Connecticut Supreme Court in 2009. A panel of 5 judges heard the arguments, ultimately ruling 4-1 against him in 2010. In January 2012, Skakel's attorneys sought a sentence reduction, arguing that he had been a model prisoner and deserved leniency, but the request was denied, and his original sentence stood. In 2013, Skakel filed another appeal, this time claiming ineffective assistance of counsel. He accused his trial attorney, Michael Sherman, of failing to adequately defend him, asserting that Sherman was more interested in the publicity of the case and financial gain than in Skakel's defense. These allegations raised serious questions about the integrity of the 2002 conviction. As a result, Michael Skakel was granted a new trial, acknowledging that Sherman had provided inadequate representation during the original proceedings. He was granted bail in 2005 on a $12 million bond. Conditions of his release included wearing an ankle bracelet with GPS tracking and strict prohibitions on contacting the Moxley family following his release. Michael Skakel was required to comply with conditions, including regular check-ins with his parole officer. 3 years later, in 2013, the Connecticut Supreme Court controversially reinstated his conviction for the murder of Martha Moxley. However, in 2018, the same court vacated his conviction and ordered a new trial, citing insufficient evidence to prove his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. This decision sent shockwaves through the legal community and reignited speculation about the true circumstances of Martha's murder, despite the possibility of a retrial. In October 2020, the chief state's attorney announced that the state would not be pursuing a new trial for Michael Skakel after a thorough review of the evidence. The chief state's attorney concluded that there was not enough proof to establish Skakel's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. This effectively brought an end to a decades-long legal battle, leaving many questions about Martha Moxley's murder unresolved. In 2023, Michael Skakel, who had been released after his 2002 conviction, filed lawsuits against the Greenwich police investigators involved in his case. The lawsuits alleged malicious prosecution and violations of his constitutional rights. According to his attorneys, Skakel spent over 11 years in prison for a crime he did not commit, and no compensation could ever fully restore the time he lost. The lawsuits accused the lead investigator of misconduct, including intimidating witnesses to provide false testimony. It was alleged that the investigator had threatened witnesses to compel them to come forward, raising serious questions about the integrity of the original investigation and Skakel's subsequent conviction. The complaints further claimed that the investigator attempted to exploit Skakel's case for personal gain, reportedly pursuing book and film deals centered on Skakel's alleged involvement while still actively investigating the murder. Martha Moxley's brother, John Moxley, expressed his feelings publicly after Skakel's release in an interview with Fox News. John stated that he struggled to understand the court's decisions. He firmly believes that Michael Skakel was responsible for Martha's death and argued that his release did not indicate innocence but was instead a result of judicial technicalities. In John's mind, the crime will forever define Skakel, who he believes will be haunted by his actions for the rest of his life. The Oxygen Network produced a documentary exploring the circumstances surrounding Martha Moxley's murder. The Moxley family participated to honor Martha's memory and shed light on the case. Michael Skakel, however, chose not to participate. His cousin, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., did take part, publicly expressing his strong belief in Skakel's innocence. Kennedy Jr. also published a book titled Framed: Why Michael Skakel Spent Over a Decade in Prison for a Murder He Didn't Commit, claiming to possess evidence that could exonerate his cousin. The book, however, drew criticism from Martha's family, who argued that it reopened old wounds without providing meaningful closure over the years. Numerous theories have circulated regarding Martha Moxley's murder. Michael Skakel remained one of the most notorious suspects. Some speculate that jealousy or anger may have motivated him, as Martha reportedly had a close friendship with his brother, Thomas Skakel. Others suggest that Michael may have witnessed an interaction between Martha and Thomas that incited feelings of insecurity or rage. Skakel himself has also been considered a potential suspect. One theory suggests he may have acted out of anger after Martha allegedly rebuffed him. Another individual often mentioned is the Skakel family's tutor, Kenneth Littleton, who has been proposed as a possible perpetrator. Alternative theories posit that Martha Moxley's murder may have been the work of an unknown assailant, possibly as retaliation for an unrelated incident earlier that night, or by a stranger passing through the area. Supporters of these theories argue that Michael Skakel may have been a convenient scapegoat, while the true killer remains unidentified. The question of who was truly responsible for Martha Moxley's murder remains unresolved. Was it Michael Skakel, acting in a moment of jealousy after seeing Martha with his brother, striking her with a golf club? Or did Thomas Skakel commit the crime after being rebuffed by Martha? Alternatively, could Martha's murder have been carried out by someone entirely unrelated to the Skakel brothers? Until a thorough investigation uncovers definitive answers, all of these possibilities remain speculative. This was the tragic and complex case of Martha Moxley. Story 6. The abduction of Denise Huskins. On March 22, 2015. 29-year-old Denise Huskins and her 30-year-old boyfriend, Aaron Quinn, spent the night at Aaron's home in Vallejo, California, roughly 30 miles north of San Francisco. Both were employed as physical therapists at a local hospital in the early hours of March 23. A terrifying ordeal unfolded at approximately 1:15 p.m. Aaron contacted the Vallejo Police Department to report that Denise had been abducted. Officers immediately dispatched units and began an extensive search, deploying search and rescue dogs and dive teams to scour the area. As the search progressed, Aaron was interviewed by detectives and FBI agents in a secure location. Aaron described a surreal and frightening scenario. A bright light shone in their faces, accompanied by a vibrating noise, which he attributed to a stun gun. A male voice ordered them to lie face down. Denise was instructed to bind Aaron's wrists with zip ties. Aaron was placed in a closet, his ears covered with headphones, playing a pre-recorded message instructing him to comply with the intruder's demands. The message warned that failure to follow orders could result in electric shocks or facial injuries. The intruder also obtained Aaron's financial account information and passwords, and claimed that a professional group was monitoring him via webcam. After being left alone, Aaron passed out on the couch and awoke to find Denise missing, along with his laptop and car. Panic set in as Aaron checked his phone and discovered a chilling voicemail from the kidnapper, demanding money for Denise's safe return. Authorities treated the case as a kidnapping for ransom. However, investigators began to question inconsistencies in Aaron's story, including the detailed actions of the intruder, the pre-recorded message, and the delay in reporting Denise missing. Some detectives suspected Aaron himself might have played a role in Denise's disappearance. Aaron's mother later revealed to Dateline that the police treated her son more like a suspect than a victim. Aaron was polygraphed 5 times, placed in a prison jumpsuit, and held with minimal food and water. Tactics perceived as coercive, despite Aaron's insistence that an intruder had abducted Denise. The lack of concrete evidence forced investigators to consider alternative theories. 30 hours after Denise vanished, reporter Henry Lee received an email containing an audio file purportedly from Denise. In the recording, Denise discussed the day's news, including a German airliner crash in the Alps, and recounted personal experiences, such as attending her first concert. On the surface, the recording seemed to confirm Denise's survival, yet Lee noticed something unusual. Denise's tone was calm, almost casual, Lacking the fear one would expect from a kidnapped victim, this led him to suspect that the recording might have been staged or manipulated. Friends who heard the recording were alarmed but not entirely surprised, noting that Denise had previously remained composed during high-stress situations, such as the 2013 Boston Marathon terrorist attack roughly 45 hours after Denise was reported missing. The Vallejo Police Department announced that she had been located in Huntington Beach, California, about 400 miles south of Vallejo. Her discovery prompted further questions. Denise had grown up in Huntington Beach, no ransom had been paid, and she reportedly refused to speak to Vallejo detectives. The FBI subsequently became involved, offering assistance to both Denise and Aaron as the investigation continued following Denise's discovery in Huntington Beach. Authorities intensified their investigation into the circumstances surrounding her disappearance. The Vallejo Police Department, together with the FBI, sought to determine whether an unknown intruder was truly responsible or if other explanations might account for the events. Forensic analysis was conducted on Denise's belongings, her vehicle, and Aaron's home, but investigators quickly encountered inconsistencies that complicated the case. Aaron Quinn remained under intense scrutiny, although he insisted that an unknown perpetrator had abducted Denise. Detectives noted discrepancies in his account. The timeline of events was unclear, and some details seemed rehearsed or inconsistent with forensic evidence. Investigators also questioned why no ransom demands had been successfully made, and why Denise had been released relatively unharmed. These anomalies fueled speculation that Aaron's story might have been fabricated. Media coverage of the case added additional pressure. Reporters from local and national outlets followed every development, interviewing friends, neighbors, and law enforcement officials. The audio recording sent to reporter Henry Lee became a focal point of debate, while it appeared to confirm Denise's survival. Experts analyzed the tone, cadence, and content of the recording and debated whether it had been staged or manipulated. Despite public interest, the case remained unresolved. Authorities could not conclusively determine whether Denise had been abducted by a third party, or if Aaron Quinn had orchestrated aspects of the story. No arrests were made in connection to a suspected abductor, and the case gradually became a cautionary tale about the complexities of modern abduction investigations and the challenges of distinguishing fact from fabrication. Denise, as friends and family, remained deeply affected by the ordeal. While grateful for her safe return, they expressed frustration over the unanswered questions surrounding her disappearance. For Denise, the experience left a lasting mark, shaping her perspective on trust, personal safety, and the unpredictable nature of human behavior. The story of Denise Huskins remains an enigma. Was she truly abducted, or had circumstances been exaggerated or misrepresented? Without definitive evidence, the truth may never be fully known. However, her case highlights the challenges faced by law enforcement when dealing with potential abductions, the importance of forensic scrutiny, and the psychological impact such events can have on both victims and those close to them. Despite offers of assistance and cooperation from the Vallejo Police Department, Denise Huskins and Aaron Quinn initially refused to engage directly with investigators. The department spokesperson remarked that Aaron's account of the alleged intruder and Denise's abduction was so extraordinary that detectives struggled to take it at face value. Upon further investigation, they were unable to substantiate key aspects of his story. The spokesperson went as far as to claim that Aaron and Denise had diverted valuable resources from the community while spreading fear among residents, arguing that the couple owed the community an apology. Detectives grew increasingly suspicious that Aaron and Denise might have fabricated the abduction. For example, Aaron claimed that he had provided the intruder with his credit card information, but no attempts were made to access his accounts. He also alleged that the intruder had called him from a blocked number, yet investigators suspected he may have pre-programmed another phone to simulate these calls. The case took a dramatic turn when Denise finally visited the Vallejo police department to speak with detectives during her interview. She revealed that, in addition to the abduction, she had been sexually assaulted. This revelation shocked the detectives, who had previously entertained the possibility that the story was a hoax. Shortly afterward, a reporter named Henry Lee received an email from the person who had abducted Denise. The writer vehemently denied any fabrication, asserting that Denise's reputation should not be tarnished by false accusations to support their claims. The email included 2 images, one showing a black painted water gun outfitted with a flashlight, and another depicting a bedroom with cardboard covering the windows. The writer claimed this was the room where Denise had been held. While these images could lend credibility to the abductor's account, their authenticity could not be verified at the time. Denise Huskin's case remained steeped in controversy, with many questioning the truthfulness of her claims. Media coverage exploded, drawing comparisons to the novel and movie Gone Girl, in which a woman fakes her disappearance to frame her husband. These parallels fueled public speculation and conspiracy theories, intensifying the media frenzy. As the story circulated, Denise and Aaron faced widespread harassment and online abuse. Trolls and anonymous individuals shared personal information, spread misinformation, and tarnished the couple's reputations. Friends and loved ones, however, staunchly defended Denise, affirming her honesty and integrity. The intense scrutiny continued until June 5, 2015, when a similar incident occurred in Dublin, California. Lending weight to Denise's claims, around 3 a.m., an intruder broke into a home, confronting the startled homeowner and his wife. The intruder shone a flashlight in their eyes and claimed he had kidnapped the couple's 22-year-old daughter. Acting quickly, the wife retrieved a cell phone while the husband shouted instructions to grab a gun, startling the intruder, who fled the scene. This real-life event provided investigators with evidence that such abductions were indeed plausible, challenging the earlier accusations that Denise's ordeal had been fabricated. When police arrived at the Dublin, California crime scene, Denise's mother and daughter were found safe in the bedroom. Investigators discovered several items left behind by the intruder, including a cell phone. Tracing the device led detectives to 38-year-old Matthew Mueller. After obtaining a search warrant for his arrest, officers traveled to the family cabin in South Lake Tahoe, where they believed Matthew was hiding upon arrival. He was taken into custody. Search of Matthew's cabin uncovered several key pieces of evidence. Investigators found a BB gun matching the description given by Denise's abductor, as well as a black painted super soaker fitted with a flashlight and laser pointer, the same one depicted in the image sent to reporter Henry Lee. Additionally, they discovered a secluded room in the cabin that closely resembled the one described by Denise's kidnapper, with boarded-up windows. A pair of swim goggles with lenses covered in black tape was also found, with a long blonde hair attached. Testing at the California State Crime Lab confirmed the hair belonged to Denise, undermining claims that the abduction was fabricated. Further investigation of Matthew's car revealed that a programmed GPS address corresponded to the Huntington Beach location where Denise had said she was left, strengthening the case that her abduction was genuine. Matthew was initially arrested and charged with battery, robbery, and assault for the earlier Dublin break-in on July 13, 2015. Additional charges including kidnapping were filed in connection with Denise's case. Delving into Matthew's background, detectives learned he had enlisted in the U.S. Marine Corps, serving as a trumpet player in the Marine Band. Although he never experienced combat, he earned several medals and ribbons, ultimately achieving the rank of sergeant. However, he developed severe mental health struggles, which he attributed to Gulf War syndrome, and requested relief from his duties after an honorable discharge. Matthew graduated from Pomona College in 2003 and relocated to Boston to attend Harvard Law School. There, he became deeply involved with immigrant and refugee advocacy, working as a research assistant at the university's Immigration and Refugee Clinic. By 2019, growing weary of Boston, Matthew moved to Silicon Valley. He passed the California bar exam, but never formally registered despite this. He worked for several immigration law firms and founded a non-profit, providing pro bono legal services to immigrants with mental illness in 2013. His law license was suspended due to unpaid dues to the California Bar Association. Matthew's mental health struggles worsened over time, diagnosed with major depression and bipolar disorder. He developed paranoid delusions, believing the government was wiretapping his phone and hacking his computer because of his work with immigrant clients. Suspected of terrorism in early 2015, he became a recluse in the South Lake Tahoe family cabin, rarely sleeping and spending hours each day watching Batman movies. His paranoia intensified, and he engaged in increasingly bizarre behavior. By spring, Matthew experienced psychotic episodes, during which he wore a wetsuit, modified swim goggles, and super soakers, and devised a distorted Robin Hood-style plan to kidnap wealthy individuals and demand ransom, justifying it morally within his deluded perception of reality. In September 2016, Matthew pleaded guilty to 1 count of kidnapping and received a 40-year prison sentence. He also faced additional state charges, including kidnapping, burglary, robbery, and 2 counts of sexual assault by force. During the subsequent trial, Denise was compelled to testify. Her account was harrowing, vividly detailing the terrifying ordeal she had endured at the hands of Matthew Mueller during the trial. Matthew Mueller appeared in court wearing a suit, shackled, and acting as his own attorney, yet what drew the most attention was Denise Huskin's remarkable composure as she faced her attacker, addressing the jurors with an unwavering voice. Denise recounted her experience, explaining that she had initially hesitated to come forward with her account of the sexual assaults. Fearing disbelief, nevertheless, she persisted, determined to seek justice for the crimes committed against her. Throughout her testimony, Denise demonstrated incredible strength. She described consciously refusing to let Matthew see her cry or succumb to hysteria. Instead, she closed her eyes and mentally imagined being with her boyfriend during the assaults, a coping mechanism that gave her comfort and strength, allowing her to endure the painful memories. She recounted in court. Interestingly, Matthew chose not to cross-examine Denise, leaving her testimony unchallenged. While he was initially deemed incompetent to stand trial on certain state charges, by November 2022, he was declared mentally fit and pleaded guilty to those charges. Netflix's documentary American Nightmare, released on January 17, 2024, provides a detailed and harrowing account of Denise's ordeal. Each 45-minute episode chronicles her abduction and the 2 sexual assaults she endured at the hands of her captor in the series. Denise recounts how the assailant, claiming to be a military veteran, sexually assaulted her twice, despite her attempt to dissuade him. By revealing she had been abused as a child, the attacker also threatened her with recorded footage of both assaults, warning that it would be released if she went to the police, fearing for her safety and the well-being of her loved ones. Denise initially refrained from reporting the assaults to authorities. In September 2015, Denise and her boyfriend Aaron Quinn filed a lawsuit against the city of Vallejo, seeking compensation for false imprisonment, defamation, false arrest, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The couple alleged that the police department had destroyed their reputations through unfounded and unprofessional claims. In 2018, they settled with Vallejo officials for $25 million, with city representatives acknowledging mishandling of the case and offering a formal apology. The Vallejo Police Department also issued an apology to the couple in 2021. Denise and Aaron co-authored a book about their experiences, shedding light on the challenges they faced during and after the abduction. The book serves as both a personal testament and an advocacy tool, emphasizing the importance of victim support. Today, the couple are proud parents to 2 daughters. Born in 2020 and 2022, Denise has focused on nurturing her children's self, ensuring that no one dictates their value, while Aaron hopes they grow up embodying their mother's resilience and courage, despite the passage of time. Denise and Aaron remained puzzled by Matthew's motives. The documentary reveals that his original plan may have been to abduct Aaron's former fiancée, Andrea, yet it remains unclear why he targeted Denise and Aaron instead. In interviews with People magazine, the couple expressed frustration at the lack of answers, but emphasized the importance of moving forward. Aaron noted that, like many victims, they may never receive a definitive explanation for the attack. Instead, they prioritize their family and work, recognizing that dwelling on unanswered questions could hinder their healing. The Denise Huskins abduction case serves as a stark reminder of the potential consequences when law enforcement misjudges claims, highlighting both the dangers victims may face and the resilience required to rebuild one's life in the aftermath of trauma. Denise Huskins' ordeal left a profound impact on both her and Aaron, as well as on the wider community. The case exposed the challenges victims often face when their experiences are questioned or dismissed. It also highlighted the need for careful, compassionate, and thorough investigation by law enforcement. The initial skepticism surrounding Denise's story, combined with the media frenzy and online harassment, underscored the devastating effects that doubt and misinformation can have on survivors. Despite these challenges, Denise and Aaron emerged stronger, their resilience serving as a testament to human determination. In the face of trauma, they turned their pain into a platform for advocacy, raising awareness about the importance of believing survivors, supporting victims, and addressing systemic failures in law enforcement procedures. Their book and public interviews have inspired countless individuals to speak up and seek help, reinforcing that the courage to confront trauma can have far-reaching effects beyond personal recovery. For Denise and Aaron, the focus shifted from seeking answers to prioritizing healing and family. They dedicated themselves to creating a stable and nurturing environment for their children, teaching lessons of resilience, empathy, and self-worth. The couple's story also emphasized the importance of mental health support, as both survivors and communities affected by crime must navigate long-term emotional challenges. Matthew's conviction, while bringing legal closure, did not erase the psychological scars left on Denise and Aaron yet. Their perseverance demonstrates that surviving such trauma involves reclaiming agency over one's life through public advocacy, sharing their story, and raising their daughters in an environment of love and strength. Denise and Aaron transformed a narrative of fear and victimization into one of courage, empowerment, and hope. Ultimately, the Denise Huskins case stands as a powerful reminder of the complexities surrounding abduction and sexual assault cases. It underscores the critical importance of listening to survivors, conducting thorough investigations, and ensuring that justice systems do not compound the trauma of those already victimized. Above all, it shows that even in the darkest of circumstances, resilience, determination, and support can pave the way for healing, recovery, and the rebuilding of a meaningful life. The Vallejo Police Department's initial dismissal of Denise Huskins' case as a hoax highlights the dangers of making judgments without sufficient evidence. Such actions not only undermine a victim's credibility, but can also impede the investigative process. This incident serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of due process and the necessity for law enforcement to thoroughly examine every lead. Only by doing so can all potential victims receive the attention, support, and justice they deserve. Matthew Mueller is currently serving his sentence at the Federal Correctional Institution, FCI, in Tucson, Arizona. He is serving a 31-year state sentence concurrently with a 40-year federal sentence. While these concurrent sentences run simultaneously, they do not merge into a single term according to court records. Mueller's projected release date is July 8, 2049. This date may change depending on factors such as good behavior, participation in rehabilitation programs, or modifications to sentencing laws. The rain falls gently and the night deepens. Thank you for joining me here at Crime Whisper. True crime stories, tales like this remind us of life's mysteries and the importance of vigilance, even as we seek comfort in the quiet of the night. If you've enjoyed tonight's story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let the rain carry you into a peaceful sleep. And until we meet again, stay safe, stay curious, and let the night watch over you.